Good afternoon to everybody. We're going to begin this brief recap of the budget that the governor presented today. With me to my right is our esteemed budget chair of the Senate Budget Committee, that is Senator Holly Mitchell. You all know me already, Kevin DeLeon. I'm going to start right now, and then we can get to Ms. Mitchell's commentary and thoughts with regard to this budget, and we'll do some Q&A. So with that, at the start of each year, we take stock of our resources and our needs and stake out our funding priorities for the year to come. This is one of the most important things that we do here in the state capitol because it directly touches the lives of so many Californians, whether through our schools, our first responders and emergency services, healthcare for our kids, as well as environmental protection. For the last several years, we have been very fortunate to invest in California and its citizens, while at the same time building up a very strong budget reserve to insulate from future downturns. I applaud the governor for bringing our budget reserve to 10% of the total state budget. The Senate is committed to protecting that progress, and we are building for the future with this budget. For the Senate, that means investing in our K-12 schools, especially by fully funding our local control funding formula to help close the achievement gap in our state. Some folks would call it the opportunity gap, rather. We want to continue our progress, our college affordability, to help more students graduate on time with as little debt as possible, including funding free community college and providing more financial aid to incentivize students to complete a degree in a timely manner. Of course, in the past year, we've seen tragic reminders of the need to invest in emergency preparedness and prevention, particularly when it comes to our vulnerability to wildfires. So we will work hand in hand with the governor to ensure California is proactive in wildfire prevention and forest management, but also that we have strong fire response plans and sufficient funding for our first responders. We'll use our strong cap-and-trade investments to reinforce these capabilities, and we will continue our historic investments in clean air to eliminate the public health menace of diesel exhaust and tailpipe emissions. To be clear, there are some dark clouds on the horizon, including significant uncertainty with the Federal Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP as we know it, and we need to be ready to protect the 1.3 million Californians who may be affected as a result of Congress's incompetence. But we stand ready to protect California from Washington's failures. And on that note, I want to thank our newest member from the California State Assembly from Los Angeles, Wendy Carrillo, for proposing $10 million in additional funding for support for residents from El Salvador with temporary protected status, TPS. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, our chair of the California State Senate, no other than Chairwoman Holly Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Good morning, everybody. As you know, the document itself is still warm. We just got copies, so I'm sure all of you will be joining me the next couple of days as we delve more deeply into the details in terms of what the governor proposed today. And I stand by the Pro Tem, and what's most interesting to me, having been a former staffer, an advocate, and now not only state senator but chair of the budget committee, is what comes next after today, the release of the governor's budget. Now is the time where we have the opportunity to have budget subcommittee meetings, the caucus, the Senate will meet to begin to talk about our priorities and see where there's an alignment and where the Senate and then perhaps the whole legislature will differ. And so the process has just begun. The Pro Tem mentioned several issues that are of deep concern to me, I'm sure. The caucus will share SCHIP in California's healthy families. Over 1 million children, some of our most vulnerable. SCHIP has been a program that has historically been supported by both sides of the aisle. And we're looking at a significant fiscal impact if it's not re-upped. In California alone, we're looking at over a $660 million hit to our general fund directly. I'm intrigued by the governor's proposal with regard to the community college online system, and so that's a new innovation that we'll continue to have conversations about. But what I have always said fundamentally is the budget is a value statement. It's a reflection of what we as all Californians prioritize, because even in your home budgets, We pay for what's most important to us. That applies to a government system as well. And so we'll go through the process, starting today with the release of his document, to begin to continue to have the dialogue, engage the public through the subcommittee and the budget hearing process to delve deeply to figure out how this will impact California, how we are investing in Californians on a go-forward basis.
Okay.
Mr. Pro Tem?
We will open it up for questions, and perhaps, hopefully, we can provide you with the answers with regards to the budget proposal of the governor.
Algunas palabras en español.
Senator Mitchell, you said in a statement you released a little bit ago that modesty is not good enough and that you'd like to see some more investments in human services, specifically around what we do with poverty. Do you have specific ideas for things that you didn't see in this budget that you want deeper investment in? And overall, do you agree with the governor's decision to place so much of the surplus money in the rainy day fund versus spending on new programs?
Well, I think that's what we experienced last year, where he went above and beyond what is constitutionally required. So from my perspective, that's the beginning of kind of this dance, the state budget negotiation dance, if you will, where the legislature will weigh in on where we think it's most appropriate to, again, invest in Californians and invest in programs that Californians rely on to survive. You know I am a broken record when it comes to child poverty and doing all that we can to create a California in which all children thrive. And so when we're looking at the S-chip rollback, when we're looking at the lack of a COLA in SSI programs, the lack of a COLA in CalWORKs, when we recognize the real current dollar values of those payments to some of California's most fragile, I think we have an obligation and responsibility to continue to do work to try to increase those payments to Californians. So again, this is the beginning of the conversation, and that's an area where I hope that we can continue to have a conversation.
Some of your Republican counterparts contend that the surplus is proof positive that Californians are overtaxed, and then we should start rolling back some of those taxes. How do you respond to that?
I think the governor responded to that beautifully in his press conference this morning, where he talked about the way our budget is built now. I think he was responding to the question, which was a fascinating one, about how it's different for him to govern now versus 40 years ago. And he talked about the economy, the way our tax structure is built, and to perceive it as surplus and therefore extra, and that we should, quote, give it back, is naive at best. We understand, based on his charts, based on projections by finance, our budget offices, that we're in the black today. We're experiencing a recovery, but we know that that will change, which is why we've set up the rainy day funds. So this notion that we would, reduce taxes or give money back is naive. We have to be in a position to continue to have a solid general fund, a healthy general fund, for out-budget years, to continue to provide the critical services and resources that Californians have grown to expect and are dependent upon.
I think how you can answer that question as well is, are we investing enough in our public schools? Are we investing enough in higher education? University of California, the finest public university system, if not the nation, the entire world. Are we investing enough in the Cal State University system? I think we know that question, the answer to that question. The answer is no. So we can invest more in human capital to grow this economy. I think the fact that we are in the black even more so, and that we do have a surplus, is also a clear reflection of Democrats being in charge and moving policies that have helped grow this economy, coming off the worst economic recession since 1929. So that's a positive side. It's not a side that you can sort of spin here or spin there. I mean, the fact that our economy continues to grow in spite of who occupies the White House in Washington is a good sign. But as our budget chair just stated a moment ago, also we're taking an approach to be fiscally responsible by storing money away in anticipation of that eventual downfall. As long as we have this president in the White House, that eventuality may come sooner rather than later. So therefore, we need to insulate the taxpayers of California. We need to insulate the policies and programs that have helped us grow to become the 6th largest economy in the world. We have to insulate programs and policies that are under threat in Washington, D.C. right now. So this is a good thing, and this is what we're looking at in a very responsible manner, in a very fiscally responsible manner.
So the
talking to some advocates afterwards who say, we're still funded, you know, in the 40th out of the country. Basically, it's not good enough. Our levels are now at 2007 levels. Just what's your take on that? Do you think LCFF is working?
Well,
or-
Katie, you just validated what I just said, you know, a few moments ago with regards to where we're at in per pupil spending, you know, at the state level and in comparison to the rest of the country. We're not at where we should be. We need to do better. And that's the decision-making that we'll have within our own caucus, as well as with the assembly and collectively with the governor. We do need to invest more, I believe, in education as well as higher education, especially with those children who have the least opportunities to prosper economically. So we do need to make those necessary investments. Ms. Mitchell?
I agree.
Is there a concern, just because you mentioned the CHIP program with Congress and funding that, but the fact that we have this federal tax reform bill that potentially could add $1.4 trillion to the deficit. So is there a concern that to offset that, federal government might cut funding that would trickle down to things like Medi-Cal?
Oh, we have yeah, obviously, you know, we just witnessed, and obviously we say this subjectively, but, you know, we just witnessed the worst tax policymaking in the history of this nation during the last month of the year of 2017. And we see how complex and how arcane tax policy is. We saw the rush job for a political win, because during the course of 2017 has been a rather disastrous political year for the president. He needed a win, and the consequences for a huge blue donor state like California are enormous. Well, you have millions of taxpayers who potentially will be double taxed as a result of the almost practical elimination or almost evisceration of the SALT, the state and local tax deduction. In California, the average Californian takes about a $22,000 tax deduction. There's a hard cap now at $10,000. So you have millions of Californians who potentially will be double taxed. And so we're trying to mitigate that with a proposal that the Senate is moving forward. There was a full-blown hearing early this morning. We believe it's a bipartisan measure. You know, we did have one Republican who did abstain earlier today, but the ramifications are real and profound and consequential of the actions taking place in Washington, D.C. that are run contrary to the values that we hold dearly to as Californians, as elected officials, as policymakers, and as senators.
Speaking of the tax plan, I asked the governor about that, your tax proposal. I asked the governor about that this morning, and he said he's definitely open to it, interested in it, but he still has some questions,
Sure.
particularly whether the IRS could basically just write some type of new regulation to get in the way of us doing that. Has that question been answered? Are there still open questions, and how are you trying to, you know, figure all of that out?
Well, you know, I will be meeting with the governor next week to discuss the budget and a variety of other issues that are pending before us. With regards to an IRS re-reg, if you will, in the near future, I feel confident that we have a solid foundation because this is not new. We've been doing this in California since 2014, where individual taxpayers can provide a charitable contribution to a general state fund and in return receive a tax credit and utilize that tax credit as a federal deduction. So this is not new. We've been doing it for Cal Grants in California. Nationwide in many red states, such as Alabama and Florida, as Arizona, 33 states altogether, they've been using this, in some instances, a 100% tax credit for purposes I wouldn't agree to, which are, for example, school vouchers for sectarian schools, but they've been doing it nonetheless. So there already is a precedent that's happening in the nation with regards to an individual taxpayer being allowed to make a 100% contribution to a state fund, and that being viewed and perceived as a charitable fund and able to deduct that from your federal reporting. So I feel confident. Now, could Congress statutorily make a change? They could, but that would impact, I want to be very clear about something. That would also adversely impact many red states that use this already as a contribution for their voucher programs, specifically in Florida and elsewhere. So it won't be that easy for Republicans just to say, we don't like what California is doing, or perhaps New York or other blue states that may follow, we're going to rewrite this statutorily. We believe that precedents is set already with the IRS, and that if we litigated this, that we'd stand a really good chance in a court of law.
Senator Daley, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has intimated that they're going to file a lawsuit over the tax changes that you're talking about. They're also banning about significant tax code changes, including eliminating state tax in favor of a payroll tax that all employers would then collect, and those details are still being worked out. Have you pondered any possibilities beyond just what you're proposing?
In terms of litigation, I am busy engaging with our outside counsel to the state senate specifically. That's the former Attorney General Eric Holder. We're having conversations right now as we speak about that potential. Also having conversations with our Attorney General, obviously with regards to Attorney General and Governor Brown, if he sees fit. That's why we'll have the conversation next week when we meet on a variety of issues. So that is possibly on the table, but I want to be very clear, not that we're exercising that option, but there are discussions with regards to that option. Two, with regards to the payroll tax that Governor Cuomo is floating in the New York legislature up in Albany. We do have members who are actually looking into that right now as we speak. I'm not going to speak too much about it. It's a little more, or maybe I don't know if it's more complex or less complex than what our SALT deduction program is, but that is an option too, and I'm keenly aware that the state of New York is looking at that. Let me just be very clear on this tax issue. The thesis behind the tax issue is to provide tax relief to millions of Californians who are going to be burdened with higher taxes as a result of the Republicans in Washington's egregious and irresponsible decision-making when it came to their tax plan. That's why we're thinking about this. We're trying to hold the state whole and to hold the individual taxpayer whole as well. So, you know, other than that, we wouldn't be having these discussions right now. And I hear the discussions from some folks about the idea of offering a SALT, a state and local tax deduction that would come directly from the general fund, which would be a $10 to $15 billion hit to the general fund. So how you would pay for our public schools, for senior citizens who have the early signs of dementia, for young boys and girls who are on the spectrum who need as early intervention as possible is beyond me. If you take $15 billion and you steal it from our public schools as a result of the Republicans' actions in Washington, it makes no sense.
You mentioned wildfire victims. I'm wondering if there's a specific amount that you have that is going to be allocated to that, or is there just a general?
As the governor referenced in his press conference, currently they're looking at a $419 million net general fund cost. There is an expectation that there would be some reimbursement from the federal government. He's also made a commitment to backfilling local property tax losses. They already have a guesstimate for the Northern California fire. They don't have one yet for the Southern California fire, which we know was larger and there was more structural loss there. And so that will be significant and will be a core fundamental aspect of the discussion around the budget. We have to. And I think the governor's comments about, again, the difference between his experience governing 40 years ago compared to now, that there are more natural disasters. And so as a result of climate change and looking at what we've experienced in this state just over the past 90 days. And so we will not ignore the reality of what Californians recently experienced and making sure that we continue to be prepared, that CAL FIRE is shored up, that we're prepared on a go-forward basis with the funds and resources we need to protect California and Californians.
Senador, unas palabras en español, si se pudiera. Sí, sí, claro que sí.
I wish. Next year.
Respondiendo a la respuesta presentada por el gobernador, no, especialmente como lo vea usted relevante a la comunidad latina de California.
Bueno, que quede muy claro, es nuestra presidenta de la Comisión del Presupuesto del Senado y yo, el objetivo nuestro, mejor dicho, es promover un presupuesto que deja algo, ¿no? Para los más marginados, los más vulnerables en el estado de California, invirtiendo mucho más dinero en la educación primaria, secundaria, preparatoria, kinder, también cuidado infantil, también la educación superior. Tenemos que tomar en cuenta también las políticas atrasadas, nefastas de Washington, cuando se habla sobre el presupuesto del estado de California. Sin lugar a dudas, el estado de California está bajo una lupa cuando se habla sobre el presidente de este país, Donald Trump, en materia de nuestros Dreamers, en materia de TPS, los salvadoreños que son constituyentes nuestros, que son grandes ciudadanos. La presidenta de la Comisión de Presupuesto, Holly Mitchell, trabajará muy de cerca con nuestros colegas y con el gobernador, y igual con nuestros colegas de la Asamblea, la Cámara Baja, para promover un presupuesto que refleje los valores del estado de California.
Se habla mucho de un surplus. ¿Cómo esto le beneficia al californiano común, no?
Bueno, como tocó el tema la presidenta Holly Mitchell sobre el surplus de 3-4 mil millones de dólares, ese es el debate, la discusión que se va a llevar a cabo en la bancada nuestra, demócrata, igual con sus colegas de la Cámara Baja, la Asamblea y con el gobernador, de dónde invertir ese dinero. Educación superior, madres solteras con hijos, single mothers with children, los más marginados, dónde invertir ese dinero y dónde vamos a invertir ese dinero, y hacia medio y largo plazo vamos a cosechar algo benéfico para el estado de California. Y precisamente, como dijo mi colega, la presidenta Holly Mitchell, vamos a tener esas discusiones, porque ese presupuesto refleja los valores nuestros como senadores, pero como seres humanos y como californianos.
Tengo entendido que son más de 40 millones de dólares que en este caso ayudarían a la comunidad inmigrante.
No 1,000 millones, ¿millones o 1,000 millones?
40 millones.
Millones, sí, no 1,000 millones, no, sí, 40 millones, sí.
Ah.
Yo quisiera señalar una política de la asambleísta Wendy Carrillo, que todo el mundo sabe que llegó a este país como indocumentada, es de origen de El Salvador, y ella propone 10 millones de dólares para la ayuda, la asistencia para los beneficiarios de TPS. Yo estoy de acuerdo, igual como es la senadora Holly Mitchell, y eso va a ser una prioridad nuestra.
Además otros fondos, ¿no?
Exactamente, sí,
Listo.
exactamente.
One more quick question. So on immigration, the legislature passed, I can't remember exactly what they all were, but several bills related to spending to aid immigrants, whether it was, I think, with maybe some legal defense or education money last year. Are those priorities, did you see them reflected in the governor's budget? Is there other spending that you would like to see when it comes to helping immigrants in California?
I don't recall seeing anything specific in the 1 hour I've had to take a look at the multi-page document. Mr. Pro Tem, I can't answer that. I don't remember. I don't want to be unfair to the governor and the document. It didn't pop out at me, but it's definitely something that we'll look more deeply into.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Pagamos demasiados impuestos los californianos, lo que dicen algunos republicanos, colegas suyos, que el superávit que existe en el presupuesto es debido a que los californianos pagan demasiados impuestos. La pregunta que hice hace rato.
The question is,
Thank you.
Some of our Republican colleagues have stated that Californians already pay very high taxes. What is our response to that? You, me, or what?
Well, if I can begin,
Okay.
and I would say, as the question was raised earlier, Californians also have a concern about our per pupil investment. Californians also have expectations about affordable or more affordable fees for higher education. And so it is our job to create this balancing act between services that we believe Californians are entitled to and deserve and demand, services, educational services that are critical to educate California's workforce into the future, to make sure that California continues to be the innovative, nation state that the world relies on. And so we have this sense of balance. I appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have this notion that Californians are overtaxed, but we also recognize that there are constituents in their districts who attend the University of California, Irvine, who have expectations of the DMV, and all of us have the expectations that our children in public schools, publicly funded institutions, have the best possible resources, teachers, and access to what they need to be successful. And so I think if my colleagues across the aisle attempted to address those issues, they may have to back off this claim that we're flush with money and should return some. I think what we should do is continue to address this issue of per pupil funding, making sure that every young Californian has access to high quality, affordable early care and education environment. We've talked about expanding access to child care slots. We've talked about increasing resources to make sure that the field of early care and education is one that is resourced and professional. Those are investments that Californians expect and demand of us to make California a desirable place to live.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it more perfectly than Senator Holly Mitchell.
That's perfect.
Nomás algo breve, pues, nomás una respuesta a esa.
But let me say this. You know, Californians will be overtaxed with the Republican plan from Washington. There's no question about it. That's why us Democrats are moving aggressively forward to provide the necessary tax relief to Californians so they're not burdened and double taxed by the fiscal irresponsibility of the Republicans securing a political win that's coming at a very high cost of taxpayers. So it's our role and responsibility to protect the taxpayers of California. It's our role and responsibility to provide tax relief for Californians. It's our role and responsibility to take what we have as a surplus and make sure we're fiscally responsible and we're measured in our approach to make the right investments that are going to pay off greatly for the people of California. Okay, with that, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just one more. Senator Mitchell specifically, many of us have pontificated about 2018 being the so-called Year of the Woman. What's your initial reaction to this budget in regard to its impact on California's women? We talk a lot about children and taxpayers. What about how maybe you see this impacting women in California?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. You know, as a result of the pro tem appointing me, I also serve on the state's commission on women and girls. We had a commission meeting yesterday, and I served on the commission a number of years ago. Then Speaker Herb Wesson appointed me, maybe 20 years ago. And the work of one of the projects the commission had then was to delve deeply into the budget and look at it from a gender lens. How would women and girls be impacted? And so I'm hoping, not just because 2018 will be yet another year of the woman, but on a go-forward basis that we continue to look at gender differences in terms of how investments or lack of investments in state programs and services will impact women. Again, right now, I can't tell you, but I am hoping that the commission, our Women's Caucus in the legislature will again use that lens to really kind of not only inform what we do as a legislature in responding to the governor's budget, but also how we can advocate to make sure that women and girls aren't left behind in the context of the budget. I think the bigger picture public policy issues around women and girls will, continue to be issues around equity across the board, pay equity, equal access to higher education, equal access to employment opportunities. Those will certainly be the policy issues that will continue to be important to the Women's Caucus and others. Thank you, Ms. Pro Tem.